Well, good day to you. It is February the 8th. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. And as I always like to do, just make a brief announcement that if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, about his priorities, about some of the teachings that he's already starting to teach humanity, and see if there's any truth to this information for yourself, or perhaps to even just get some background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, the best thing to do is to do your own research. Now, I have included links in the description portion of these videos that take you to websites that talk about this information to hopefully make that research a little bit easier for you and a little bit more efficient. Check it out because all the information on those websites are free. I would recommend checking out the Share International site first. You can get the best background information there than you can anywhere else. Now, you want to come back and join the discussion. Let me know what you think. Post a comment. You can ask a question or two if you'd like by posting your question in the comment section, or you can email me that question to searchforsigns@mail.com, and I'll try to answer that question in the next video. How about that? Now, I want to start it with a comment, and then I'll go to a question, and then I'll do another comment, and then I'll try to finish it up by answering a question. How about that? So the first comment, it says, this is coming from Alfred. And now this comment actually made me laugh, but I wanted to talk about something kind of serious about it. Gary's comment and laugh at his own comment, which happens all the time in my life, about marriage, and even put the time in there, which is kind of cool, was also tongue-in-cheek. I hope it doesn't get him into any trouble. No, I'm safe. I don't think my wife listens to the videos I put up. And that's probably for, I've said a few things from time to time that will probably get me into trouble, and that might have been one of them. But for the most part, I don't think she listens to these videos, if at all. But I wanted to talk about a couple things in reference to this, and kind of share some personal experiences when it comes to my family. But for the most part, most of my family know about my own personal experiences with Maitreya, my view on my political views, or my view on the need to share and the need for justice and those kind of things, and have a basic understanding that I know and what I believe about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Some of them don't, because they've never talked to me about it. Now, for the most part, I've tried to talk with them too, but it might not have worked out. But even some of my coworkers and so forth don't know anything about what I believe because they haven't asked me any questions about it. And I don't go around trying to ram this information down people's throat. Now, Benjamin Creme and Maitreya have both recommended and urged people to talk about this information with people and how important it is. But they also have left it in there for your discernment, whether if somebody is not interested, to not keep trying to ram it down their throat. So I don't go walk into a store and start talking about Maitreya with random strangers, and I don't expect anybody else to do that too. I would talk about it with random strangers that come to this channel because you've come to this channel in your own way, in your own speed, have shown a little bit of interest in this, and if you ask a question, well, then that's opening it up even more. But for the most part, I kind of leave people to do their thing and believe what they believe for the most part, right? Now, the closest people in my family, my wife, my daughter, and my mother, have all met Maitreya at some point because we had some experiences. I've had an experience with Maitreya when they were around. So I know they've seen him. My brother, who I'm not that close with, he has seen a UFO. He didn't believe it to be a UFO, but I was there along with his neighbors and so forth who also saw the UFO, and I never told him that the reason why it even showed up is because I asked Maitreya if it was possible if he could have the Space Brothers have a UFO show up in front of him. But he doesn't believe it, so I never told him the backstory about why it appeared, and I never told him he was wrong for believing what he believed. I just kind of let him to believe whatever he wants to believe, right? And my daughter, I don't impose on my beliefs on her at all. So she's come up with her own conclusions about her political views, about her social views on social justice. I haven't really taught her anything that I've believe about that. She's come up on those beliefs on her own, which I think is important because Benjamin Creme once said, really, even though everybody thinks it's the best thing to do to instill your own values into your kids, what's right and wrong based on your own religious and moral beliefs, that's not always the best thing to do. And sometimes it can be really, and a lot of times, and it can be really harmful on the child. So the best thing to do is to let them discover the truth about their own spiritual nature and what then kind of put it together in the way that they view it, and not just to instill your Christian view or your Muslim view or your New Age view on them, and just let them come up with it on their own. And same thing with political views. I never imposed my political view on my daughter. There was a time, actually not too long ago, because she's kind of young, where she was kind of leaning more to the right on a lot of issues. And I never told her she was wrong in her thinking, or she should think this way, and this is the right way, and that's the wrong way, or whatever. I just kind of let her do her thing. And now she's probably more to the left than me, actually. And someone would think that it was my influence on her, what I was telling her, how I was trying to manipulate her or whatever to have her be more like me, but there would be no truth to that because I haven't talked to her about it. Every time she brings something up about politics or social issues, I always just listen to her. And then if she asks me a question, I always say the same thing I said when she asked me if Santa was real. I would say, what do you think? And then she'll tell me her view. And she usually doesn't swing back around and ask me my opinion. Sometimes, every so often, she says, well, I asked you your opinion, Dad. What's your opinion? And then I'll tell her if she asks me like that. For the most part, I don't really impose anything on her. And pretty much by and large, parents are guilty of imposing their own beliefs on their kids. And it creates issues, really. It creates problems, I think. So that's why I chose not to do it, based on the suggestions and teachings of Benjamin Creme, actually. But anyway, thank you for your concern, and your comment did make me laugh, for sure. All right, now, Ms. Ruby, you had a question for me. Have you ever heard of Constance Coombe? And the answer to this question is yes. And you ask me all the time about, have I heard this person or heard of this person or this movement or whatever. And most of the time I don't know it. You're a lot more read than I am. But this time I actually have read one of her books, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. If you don't know who Constance Coombe is, she is a lawyer from Michigan who some decades ago wrote either one book or a series of books. I only read one of her books, again entitled The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, about how evil she saw, or she views, the New Age movement. And she views it as coming from Satan because it's so different from what she was taught coming up through the churches and so forth. She kind of roped Benjamin Creme in it, Maitreya, and of course Alice Bailey into that whole New Age movement. Now, for the most part, most of you probably would be shocked to hear me say this, most New Age perspectives that people have, I don't personally agree with because it doesn't have the ring of truth for me. So I don't go around with crystals on me or light incense and candles and so forth. I don't know, I'm trying to think of old school New Age views and so forth. For the most part, I'm only really concerned about one thing, and that is the future of humanity. I do realize that the only way we're going to get there is together, and the only way to bring us together is through the principle of sharing. That's really my view on the New Age. Now, I also am a person who lives a life, goes to the store, has a job, has a life, but yet it seems completely normal to me that there are a small group of individuals known as the Masters of Wisdom that are perfected members of humanity. To me, it's totally natural for me to believe that. I don't expect everybody else to believe that. I don't try to impose that on everybody else, but that to me is completely natural. Constance Coombe did not have that same belief, for sure. And as my grandmother would say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But the reason why I'm even saying anything, I will give her some credit, is she did her own research. She drew her different conclusions based on that same research that I've read the same books that she's read, but I have a totally different conclusion on that information than she did. But to her credit, she at least took the time to do it, and she didn't just throw her hands up and say that's evil and not do her own research. She did do research on it, for sure. So I give her credit in that regard. I just have a different viewpoint on it. I don't know if she's ever met Ben. I don't think so. I know she's probably gone to a lecture or two of his. I think she said something about that maybe, but I know she's never met Maitreya, so how would she think that he's the Antichrist other than reading something that's different than what she believes and just kind of putting her own spin on it? But that is what it is. And she's not alone in thinking that, so she's not too far off from what most Christians would believe Maitreya to be. I think they will be proved wrong. I think that a lot of Christians will eventually see Maitreya, the qualities in him that they were perhaps aspiring to themselves, but also reading in their own book, the Bible, about what the qualities that Jesus had. They'll see it in real life. When they see the Master Jesus, they might trust that that's the Master Jesus. They might not, but they will see those same qualities in him that they see in Maitreya. Same thing that if they see the Master Kuthumi, they'll see the same, and so forth and so forth. They'll see the same loving qualities in him that they see in Maitreya, that they perhaps thought about as best of humanity, because that's really who and what these masters are, the absolute best of what we can eventually be. So, will she get it in this life? Probably not, but in the next life she might come back in incarnation and be totally fine with Maitreya and who he is. But anyway, each in her own speed, I guess. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about karma based on some comments, and so I'm going to tie two comments in, and then I got one more question I want to try to answer. So Dr. Sue 5, I'm pretty sure that the real Maitreya would suggest you to notice that you carry those traits too, and to look within yourselves to see when you behave the way they do. Or he might tell you to be careful because the laws of the universe will keep bringing people with those character traits into your life, and if there is none, then you will hold those traits. That's the first comment. And then the second comment I wanted to kind of group into with that is a comment about karma from Anthony Bergiorno. And what did he say? I'm responding to your last video on 2/1/25 related to the subject of karma. The surface and common understanding of karma is retribution for action performed with like action going forward is not the whole story of the deep and unfathomable work of this law. Just one, and certainly not the only insight, can be found in the theosophical pamphlet Reincarnation and Karma by William Quan Judge, which includes 31 aphorisms. Number 28 is what I'll share. No man but a sage or true seer can judge another's karma. Hence, while each receives his deserts, appearances may deceive, and birth into poverty or heavy trial may not be punishment for bad karma, for egos continually incarnate into poor surroundings where they experience difficulties and trial, which are for the discipline of the ego and result in strength, fortitude, and sympathy. Well, thank you very much for your comments. Now, I wanted to talk about this. First, I just wanted to make a point about the wording coming from the Theosophical Society when they refer to the ego. They are talking about the soul. So when Alice Bailey and Benjamin Creme and these masters talk about us being souls in incarnation, that's what they're talking about when they talk about the ego. So the popular view of ego is when somebody has a big ego, that means they think highly of themselves, right? And that's not what William Quan Judge was talking about for sure. The other thing is that I wanted to talk about, because I think this was in reference to a comment that somebody made that said, reap what you sow, not what somebody else sows, because I had talked about the different types of karma. So there's individual karma. According to the masters, there's individual karma, there's group karma, there's racial karma, national karma, and then world karma, I think, are other karmas. So we're not isolated and alone. So for instance, an example of world karma would be the environment. So when corporations and nations harm the environment, we are all responsible for it, even if we're not harming the environment as much as an oil company would be doing. And it's for each and every one of us to solve the problem because it's affecting each and every one of us. Now, yes, there is individual karma. What we put out, we get back. What we reap, we sow what we reap. Or we reap what we sow, excuse me. And so it's the law of cause and effect. What you think, what you say, and what you do has an action that creates a cause, and that cause will eventually come back to you as some kind of result, right? And it's not so much about retribution and punishment as it is about the balancing of the two. So when someone harms somebody else, it creates an imbalance. The process and the engine to help that person evolve is they have to work through balancing out that karma. Now, we've all generated negative karma. That's why we're human. These masters have shared that same experience because they were once human and now have moved past it to where they don't create personal karma as the way that we each do. They have chosen to stay here and incarnate back into humanity to teach humanity, because they're going to show us exactly how to live within that law perfectly. There'll be examples of how to live within that law perfectly, because they don't create personal karma. So we'll have a better understanding of it based on who and what they are, but also how they'll be teaching humanity. And Maitreya is going to give probably central to his teaching will be the law of cause and effect. It's that important. How to live harmlessly, how not to infringe upon the free will of others, and so forth. But when a nation, because there is national karma, when a nation invades another country, it creates a karmic imbalance between those two nations that the aggressor needs to work, that nation needs to work out. So when the United States attacks the Middle Eastern countries the way that we've done, there's obviously a karmic situation that has to be worked out. Now, my criticism of the world leaders of today is that very few of them, if any, legislate with the law of cause and effect in mind. They're almost totally ignorant, if not totally ignorant of that law. Now, I'm not typically as critical of people in my life as I am of our world leaders, but I do think that's the position that they're in. It's kind of like, it's part of the process. I think it's part of our job as a democratic society to be critical of our leaders, right? So I'm not faulting them as being bad and I'm good. I'm just saying that looking at somebody like Donald Trump, when he comes on the political stage in 2015 and starts attacking all the media, calling them fake news, calling them the danger to democracy and danger to our society and so forth, and then he turns around, and he literally does this, turns around and expects them to love and respect him. It doesn't work like that. Just as you can't go around insulting people and demeaning people and expect them to love you. It does not work like that. It doesn't matter whether you're the President of the United States or if you're an individual in Atlanta, Georgia, like myself. You can't do that and expect, but we all are guilty of that. So we find ourselves in situations, for instance, a parent might be very critical of their child and expect their child to be devoted and love him. It doesn't work like that. That seed of criticism, that seed of perhaps hate or whatever, will eventually foster into the same kind of criticism coming back to you. The only way to resolve that is to take the teachings of perhaps of Jesus or Muhammad, or in the future of Maitreya, and forgive. So, for instance, Ben had spoken about a woman who he knew who was molested by her father. And it was an awful situation, of course, right? It created her whole life, and she was experiencing this emotional trauma her whole life based on what someone who she looked up to and loved should have never have done, right? Which is really what it amounts to. And the pain that it caused her was immense. So she confided in him about what had happened. Well, when he asked his master a little bit more about the story, he said it started 2 lifetimes ago, because the law of cause and effect and the law of rebirth go hand in hand. So the father molested her, the daughter, 2 lifetimes ago. They lived through that trauma of it their whole life, and then they reincarnated again in a family, but the dynamic flipped. So it was the daughter who was then the father was the daughter, and the daughter father, kind of figure now molested the daughter. And then it flipped again. The dynamic flipped again to where the original father molested her, the now daughter. And that's kind of how the way he says harm works is when you harm someone, that harm person will eventually turn around and have to harm you to balance that karma out. The only way to not have that happen is to follow the precepts and teachings of Jesus and forgive. And when you forgive, that mitigates the karma, or keeps you from having to balance out the karma. So when Jesus was persecuted and crucified, he did not have to come back in the next lifetime and persecute and crucify his aggressors, because he truly forgave them. That's the only way to stop the cycle, or to keep the cycle from happening, I guess. And so they had to deal with the karma on their own and not him. And so Ben's master even wrote an article the month before September 11th, entitled "Sufficient unto the Day is the Evil Thereof." He was quoting a biblical verse about this very thing. When evil strikes against you, the best thing to do is nothing. But most people want to solve the problem, want to bring about legal justice in some way, thinking that that will help the karma lords in their do their bidding. And he says it doesn't work like that. Because we might see somebody doing harm to other people, and why isn't anything bad happening to them? It might not be right away. It might be 2 or 3 lifetimes down the road that they have to learn the lesson. But the karma lords know exactly the point of timing where it's perfect for them to have to deal with and balance out that karma. And for us to instill our own brand of justice on it doesn't help them out, doesn't actually get the person to learn what they needed to learn. It all in their own time. But nations have to deal with the imbalance of karma from harming another nation, just as an individual would. Does that make sense? So hopefully that gives a better understanding of and thoughts on karma. And it's not the end all and be all of it, because I don't claim to know the end all and be all of that law, but Maitreya will be teaching us the end all and be all of that law while he's here. So hopefully we'll take advantage of it and learn from him. All right, moving on. All right, what is it? There's a question. You've gone a bit on a post-bender, huh? And I have. Over the past few days, I put up more videos than I did in quite some time. Now, I will not typically put up another video until I get a question. And if I got questions every day, I would probably put up a video or two every day, or at least every other day. So if you want more videos, ask more questions. That would be the moral of this story. But yes, I did go on a bender. Just one question for me. There is much talk in the spiritual community regarding a 3D and 5D split. My understanding is that Maitreya is going to act as a mirror so that one portion of the world will see themselves in him as benevolent, i.e. the destined coming one, and one portion will see themselves in him as malevolent. Malevolent? Am I pronouncing that right? I.e. the Antichrist. This, for me, makes more sense. He will be a perfect mirror, and people will see their reflections when they focus on him. This way, those who have done their inner work and arrived at love will be unperturbed by Maitreya's arrival. However, those who have ignored their inner work or failed to work on themselves will be more accusatory and judgmental, and thus will believe Maitreya to be evil. I'm sure your thoughts differ and are fixed on the perspective born of the alignment of Ben's teachings, but I wanted to ask your opinion on this in any case. Peace and blessings. And just as karma works, peace and blessings back to you for that. So you put out good thoughts, you get good thoughts back. You put out negative thoughts, you get negative thoughts back. That's for sure, right? So anyway, I'm not really sure what a 3D or a 5D split are, so I've never heard that term, but your understanding of Maitreya as a mirror, or any of these masters, or really any one of us, we experience this all the time in our life, whether it's a family member, a coworker, or some stranger on the street. We really see in them who and what we are, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're saying to a degree. So I can see where you're coming from with that. Was that born, what was it? How did you put it? Was that born on the alignment to Ben's teachings? I don't know. I guess so. And just as what Dr. Sue was saying in terms of you bring those people into your life, really who you are. Yeah, that's the case. But to talk about it very practically for most people, and then talk about it very impractically, but actually on some level it's very practical, but for most people it would be considered very impractical. But let's talk about it very practically first, and then I'll talk about the second part later. The practical thing about Maitreya and the people's reactions to it will really boil down to, do you want in the world what he's advocating? Which he's advocating the need for peace, really, a need for a future, the need to try the principle of sharing, to bring about justice for all. Do you want that or not? If you don't want that, then you might not see him as the Antichrist if you're not religious, but you might not be copacetic with what he has to say, right? If on some level you want what he wants, then perhaps you will see, yes, I agree with that. So therefore, Maitreya not saying who he is for a reason is so that you can honestly answer that question for yourself. I agree with what he has to say, or I don't agree with what he has to say. Do you see what I'm saying? But the seeing in him yourself, we do all the time in our lives. Wouldn't you say? Right? So that the divisions that we're already seeing are really because, or it's an energetic thing, and this is the impractical thing for most people, but it's very practical from the master's point of view, because this is the truth of life, is that everything in life is energy. Eventually we will come to that scientific conclusion. It will be proved scientifically that all in life is energy, but right now it's just theoretical for most people, probably myself included. I don't go around thinking everything in life is energy all the time. I kind of get on with my day, and that kind of thing. But eventually we'll come to the realization that that is true, that everything in life is energy. Most of us are totally ignorant of what energies we're using to build the civilization that we are in today, or what create the lines of thinking that we have today. The masters will say that it's coming from the constellations of the zodiac is what brings about the creation of the civilizations of the time, the ways of thinking of the time, and so forth. And over the last 2,000 or so years, we've been under the influence of the age of the constellation of Pisces. Those energies have saturated the solar system and all its planets, and our planet is one of them. Now, on our level, it's built the civilization that we have today, which is based on the individual. We've turned it into based on competition, based on greed. The greediest, most competitive person who's willing to do the most dirty work to get ahead will get ahead based on that. And those systems, whether it's political, economic, legal systems, are all supportive of that way of being. They're totally unjust, but that's the environment that we're in. So today, in the year 2025, if you are very competitive and clever in that way, and don't show everybody all your cards, and aren't transparent or honest or whatever, and you're willing to lie, you can get as far ahead in the world as you possibly can. Just look at our world leaders and how they are, right? Look at the businessmen and women who are very successful at what they do. They're not the best people out there, right? They're not the most loving, caring people in the world, and yet they're very rich and successful. In the United States, we put a lot of emphasis on sports and competition. That's the same kind of deal. And those people that are very good at competing on the field are very wealthy, because of that. They have no business making the money that they're making, right? But we support it because that system supports it. And yet there are people who are literally starving to death that have no way of competing because they have nothing to compete with. And they literally have no food to eat. And yet we allow them to die, and that's okay because I'm all right. That's the world that we're living in. And it's so dangerous that right now, literally, we could all kill ourselves because we have the capabilities of doing it, right? And we have the way of seeing things that is totally separate from one another, but there's no truth to it. Now, in the future, the energies of Aquarius are really at the exact opposite end of the spectrum from where it is today. It's much more about group work. In fact, the energies of Aquarius can't be used as an individual alone. It has to be done in group formation. Synthesis, brotherhood, cooperation, peace, unity, these are all slogans that we are familiar with, but we won't really see it in place and manifested on planet Earth until long into the future of the Aquarian age. And then it will be very real. We'll all understand it. And if you were to be a greedy, competitive, person that's very successful today, and we could teleport you 1,000 years into the future, you're not going to have any systems that support that. You're going to be left out in the wilderness because you're not going to know what to do. Just as if we were to take the system of economy today and move it into the future some kind of way, it would literally collapse upon itself because there would be no energies to support it. So that's where we're at today. So that you got, within all of humanity, with the billions of people living on planet Earth today, all of us have both energy qualities in our makeup. It just depends on the ratio. So if you're very much about the past and you're very successful in what you're doing today based on competition and greed, well, you're probably more aligned with the energies of the past. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just kind of where we're at in our point of evolution as a planet today. And probably have little to none of the new ways of thinking. If you're perhaps find it rather hard to get along in today's world because you're more caring about people and, and those kind of things, and you want to see sharing and you want to see peace and justice, and nobody in your life is supporting that, and you don't have any political systems that are willing to hear your voice, you're probably experiencing more of the new energies, and the structures aren't put in place yet to support that. So you're kind of left in the same kind of boat, like, okay, well, I want to see something new, right? Well, the people who are in power, who have all the money that the systems of today and the past are supporting, have all the power and the influence because they are using the systems of the past to their own benefit. Does that make sense? So, yes, I see where you're saying about Maitreya will be a mirror, but it's also an energetic thing. And then Maitreya, just the love nature of the Christ brings about that cleavage for a time. It's not permanent, but for a time, because it brings to the surface who and what you really are. So if you are very selfish and greedy, you become even more selfish and greedy so you can see it. If you're corrupt as a system, it becomes more corrupt, and people can see the corruption and the pain and that it causes because of it has to come to the surface in order to be dealt with. It can't be dealt with subliminally and subconsciously. It's got to come to the surface. But if you're a selfless person and you care about your fellow man and you want to see the environment improve and you want to see justice for all, well, you're going to want that even more. And that's the sort of cleavage. Yes, what you're seeing in Maitreya is who and what really is representative of who and what you are, right? But it's an energetic thing too. Maitreya has said that we have to go through this stage of development as a humanity in order to make the right choice, to choose sharing. So we might not understand it now. I think in the future we'll have a better understanding of why we had to go through this, but eventually we will come together as a humanity where there won't be divisions. It's been even said in the Bible, Jesus said in the book of John, "And I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me." That's what the Christ will do. When we finally see and recognize him for who he is, the Lord of love, the one awaited by all the world's religions, all of humanity will eventually be drawn to him. It might not be right away, but eventually all humanity will be drawn to him. We'll solve the problems in the world based on his suggestions in that way. He'll galvanize and inspire humanity in that way. But like I said, it was predicted in the Bible, But anyway, I love you guys. Thank you very much for the questions and the comments, and I look forward to putting up videos in the very near future. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.